want to speed on highways.
I may or may not have been doing
Warning
coming
recording.
back from Roosevelt yesterday.
Thank you.
They put me in a different rig that doesn't even have radar, so you don't have anything to worry about.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Okay.
We do have Rebecca and David are on.
Okay. Good. Let me go ahead and get it here so I can see who's here.
He can watch us.
And he watches. All right. Well, good morning all for this. It's a beautiful day.
Yes.
It is. Start. I guess actually I would like to start, if we could, with just an update from the workshop on Monday. I don't know. You were the participant?
So our workshop on Monday had all the same people that are in the room, and on the Zoom, we discussed which direction would make the most sense to go. And the first agreement that we came to is that the code compliance officer doesn't need to be in the building department. And Rebecca has done some research on where they're housed throughout the state. Rebecca, are you there?
She is.
I am.
Okay. And so we came to the idea and the conclusion that the place that it could be housed is in the sheriff's department. But I said we would need to have a conversation with my seatmates about what that would entail and what that would look like, because that would be, if it's underneath the sheriff, we have no oversight of it. Then it would need to be the nuisance board of appeals would be housed like underneath us, so to create some checks and balances. And that's one option. Another option that Rebecca and I spoke about yesterday is the nuisance officer could be underneath the commissioners, because we hear about them all anyways. That would be, something different. But I wanted to leave that up for the general discussion. But Rebecca and everybody's done a lot of hard work and effort getting here. Lynn has worked her tail off creating different versions of the document, and where we can go. And we had a really productive discussion. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Rebecca, would you like to give your overview of how you understood it, since I'm sure we see things differently?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think the discussion you and I had yesterday just about what we're looking at is more than just nuisance abatement code, which is 1538. We're really looking at.
Can you turn her up a little bit? Or I need my third cup of coffee here. All right, go ahead, Rebecca. I'm sorry.
Okay. So Jake and I spoke briefly yesterday after I had done some research and looked at our code more. And I think what we're really talking about is more than just changing chapter 1538. We're looking at actually changing code enforcement completely. So this is not just pertaining to nuisances. This would be code violations, health department violations, and planning department. Any violation it would be sent over to this individual. So where I think we had started at, this is a nuisance issue, I think we're looking at a bigger change to our code.
Okay. Any thoughts as far as you referenced, or Jake, you referenced how it's done in other counties? I didn't see anything on that. anything anybody wants to share as far as has this model been used in other places?
I can speak to that as to my research. I did spend quite a bit of time trying to find other counties that have sent it over to the sheriff's office. I'm aware of one, and that's Chelan County. They did it last year. As far as I can see, no other county has done this. You certainly have some cities that have worked with their police departments, but Chelan did it last year, and they had some of the same concerns in terms of who has the oversight then, especially when you have employees in that department being, the sheriff is not an expert in code violations in terms of building and planning. And so now they have another employee under them that's working to do that enforcement. So they had some of the same concerns, but as far as I can find so far, that's the only county that has done that in Washington state.
Okay, I guess I would open up the discussion. Thoughts?
I'm in favor. Code enforcement all the way through has been an issue for years. And we need to do a full, not just nuisance, but code enforcement as well. And we all know that it's going to become more and more apparent, and there's going to be more people, more complaints coming in. And so doing a full rewrite, it's going to touch on, a lot of different pieces within the county code, I think is the appropriate way to do it. And if we're going to have somebody doing it, I think the person would kind of like the same thing with a public records officer, where you have a centralized location for a clearinghouse, and then that individual would then work with the individual department heads and move it through that way. Where we put it though, that's the question for the board. And your guys' thoughts would be, happily appreciated.
Okay.
I'm good with all of that. And on the part of where we put it, I think it needs to stay under commissioner's jurisdiction.
Yeah, that would be the issue I'm struggling with a little bit is the, as much as I'd love to hand off the whole thing, there is a certain appeal to having law enforcement just because you're basically dealing with all this stuff already. This is in your book of business. As far as not so much as far as like the hard line, the problem cases, the ones that take that's the issue. A lot of code enforcement, nuisance abatement, all that stuff, 95% of it goes off without a hitch. As far as they may be some difficulty, you have some people that they really either don't know or didn't care, and then once they comply and it's not a big issue. But most of our angst and turmoil is around actually a pretty small number of people that they know they don't care, and they're going to have to be forced against their will into compliance. And those are the people that it's really most appropriate. That's really in your area of expertise. That's you also have those. I'm assuming your interactions are probably the same. 95% of your interactions are easy. They're fine. It's the 5% that causes 95% of the.
And I would say that 5%, as far as the nuisance issues, we're probably already dealing with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's not confined to a single area of someone's life. It's
Exactly.
oh no, they're a model citizen and everything else. Yeah. No, generally not. So I like that part. The part I am a little concerned about is the oversight as far as these are, because there is, some of these are, many of them, they're planning issues, they're building department issues, and those are certainly departments that are commissioner-led departments. And so you'd have to figure out some way to have some.
So I don't mind keeping it under, I don't know, that's the hard part, because to me, it's all of the other ones are far more often, far more common than the ones that it'd be really nice to have a badge for. So I mean, if there was a way to funnel that smaller 5% or 10% over there, that would be fine, but I don't want to funnel 100% over there. So I don't think we would behoove ourselves at this time to give up oversight.
He really is good at hiding behind that.
Yeah, he's behind it. So I would open up, yeah.
I have a question. If he gets something that's one of the easier things to fix and he says, hey, Lynn, I have such and such, and he gives it to me because that's my level of knowledge, or he gives it to Mochi or David,
Right.
because that's our area. Felt septic, he gives it to David. Then we would work what's our topic. That would bring it back under you because I am under you. Would it not?
Potentially, but it's also, what if we have a situation where it is it's a health department thing, it's a failing septic system. It seems having an officer respond to a failing septic system seems like a nuclear option. And that might in some ways incite more, or we have a code, which septic system is actually a really good example, because we have another one I saw, interchange on the west end. So would we envision this as far as it's a sheriff's department employee, is it actually a uniform commissioned officer, or could it be something?
So we had some discussion about staying away from that it would be a separate thing. The sheriff and I have talked about it, and he envisions more like a detective type of position where it's somebody that would be full commissioned, but wouldn't be out there responding to regular calls. So it's not a uniform showing up.
Okay.
It's, and when we had our discussion, it was kind of like a central place to put the complaint. And then that person would have to be very good at working with other departments and working with members of the public where they're into gaining compliance. Like, it's not necessarily about enforcement in most of the complaints. It's about gaining compliance. So they would take the initial, maybe that, everybody calls the sheriff's office anyways for these issues. So the initial deputy would take a complaint over the phone and forward that complaint to a code compliance officer or detective, whatever we want to call that position. And then that person would go out and do the follow-up with that, make contact with the person. Hey, somebody filed a complaint. And I think we talked about for nuisance things, it would still remain at the 2 complaints within a 5-mile radius. Has to be named, signed, all that kind of stuff, as it is now. So it wouldn't necessarily change that part of it. But I think there was discussion about an actual code violation outside of the nuisance side, where it would be a single complaint, because those are safety issues. Those are issues that there could be some liability on. So I think the way that we initially looked at it was it wouldn't have anything to do with a uniform type of position. And I would still envision that would remain as it is.
So you're saying detective, does that mean they would have to go to academy?
So what with detectives, we take people that already have experience. So it'd be somebody within the department already, and then we would backfill with somebody that would go to the academy and cover that stuff.
What is the price difference between our normal code compliance officer?
$4 an hour,
Detective?
if I'm not mistaken.
I will give you credit, sir.
Right now, as I find it, it's $22.05 to $28.77 per hour is what we pay for the code compliance position. That's what it's budgeted for. And I believe that our full-time is about 26 to 32. If I'm not mistaken.
The other thing is, if it goes underneath the sheriff, it's part of the bargaining, collective bargaining, you've got all the.
Union, it would be union regardless. And we kind of talked about the process would be like a complaint would be filed. The detective would do, sorry, that was off. Basically, the detective would get the initial deputy would get the complaint. The detective would go out, follow up with the people, find out what the issue is. And then they would do an investigation, and that investigation would involve the other departments that have specialties in those areas. So if it's a septic issue, we bring in the appropriate agency for that. If it's a nuisance, like trash issue, a lot of that is just going out and working with people. So there would be other ways, and then the detective would put together that case and present it to, if it rose to that level, then they would present it to the board for enforcement recommendations, or, if it gets to an abatement situation, there's a lot of cost involved in that. So it would
So
not
we still
necessarily,
envision, as far as the way the current code works, where
that was,
authorization to abate would still
Yeah.
rest with the board.
yeah, because
'Cause
otherwise,
we're spending money.
otherwise it's like, oh, we just spent $200,000 on abatement. We need that money. And it's
Right.
kind of like, well, we're already in a tight spot where we coming up with 200 grand to
Right.
backfill. We've got a process for that.
How hard do you foresee it if we do that and it's a union position, getting nuisance abatement in that contract? So that detective is also picking up trash.
I wouldn't anticipate that they would be the ones out picking up the trash. And I don't know that our current code compliance officer was out there picking up trash.
They
as
weren't,
well.
but in my vision in the future is when we send these out to bid and get 50 grand as an estimate for 2 days' work,
Sure.
I would like that position to also be doing it. I would like, when we rehire public works flaggers or whatever,
Sure.
when one of them leaves, instead of filling that position, throw that position out, rewrite a new position that says flagger / occasional nuisance abatement. So that when we're doing 1 a year or 2 a year, we have our own employees and we don't have to pay somebody 40 grand a year to do it. That's my hope.
Yeah. I would think that if we had a code compliance officer that was overseeing that, they would be on scene, sort of supervising the project. I don't know
What
know
you're
about
saying is it's
changing.
gonna be very hard to get them to pick up trash.
I don't know the union position on that, and I probably shouldn't speak for the union on that.
And I see that's certainly relevant, but I see it as a side issue as far as when we got the abatement is only one piece of it. And that's really that's grown out of the problem of, we always put it out to bid, and we
Right.
got bids and the private sector did it. The whole conversation has come because those numbers are crazy numbers now. And so we're looking at other alternatives, which would be either using public works folks, doing it ourselves, basically not
Or
kind of the
us
same thing we've done.
helping the people we're hiring.
Right.
So they're
No different than we've taken on, buildings and grounds has taken on, we've hired a carpenter. It's because it was the same thing. All of that stuff used to go out to bid, or contract, and we either can't get anybody to do it, or the numbers we get, we can do it in-house ourselves for half as much. So
Right.
we're, and I see this going the same way,
Sure.
that it's just, so it might make it, we might actually do more abatements if we could, we actually could get a little more value for our dollars. So, and that is something, if we're going to be, if it's going to be how the abatement part of it is going to be if we're gonna have county crews, likely it would be in buildings and grounds. It
Right.
wouldn't be in the sheriff's department.
And that would,
But an interesting question of,
Yeah.
is the code, gonna help out with that?
and I think a lot of it depends on who gets in that position. And, I shared some stories about the town of Klickitat. There were, I think we counted something like 37 or 31 abandoned vehicles in Klickitat. And we sent Robert Bianchi down there. And Robert got every single vehicle moved without writing a single ticket. He didn't have to use any enforcement. And it was just the way that he approached people, and he just stayed on people that there was issues with. So I think
It's hard to say no to him.
well, and there are some deputies that are like that. It's
Yeah.
just they learn how to
There's two
interact
good
with people.
options. There's,
Yes.
and I have to be politically correct when I say this. There's the way we've always done it in the past, which is a nice, sensitive, approachable
right.
way, or the way with the badge, which you're gaining authority, so you don't, that middle one is the mistake. I'm kind of, I'll go that way or I'll go this way. I
Right.
don't want to go where we were.
Well, understanding that, and I won't speak for the legal folks, people do have due process rights, that it's we don't show up with the,
Badge saying you're doing this.
you're doing this, yeah, you're gonna do this or else. So, we do have to follow the process, give people a chance. Yes,
So
sir.
two other things. If it's housed in the sheriff's department, you're around the sheriff's officer more often. The sheriff's department is accustomed to writing reports. They are accustomed to going on the stand.
Right.
It's a regular occurrence. If this moves through the process to abatement or to that next step, at least writing tickets and all that, that is something that the sheriff's department has the training, and they do that regularly, and they can help train internally for the position. The other, on the back side of that is if you hire somebody who isn't working out very well, we're having issues with the constituency about how this person interacts in public, how they're dealing with it. The commissioners have zero control.
Right, and that's my worry.
Um,
If it turns into, we don't believe the position's working correctly, there's nothing we can do about it at that point.
No, our virtually our only oversight is in the budget process, and that's a tough tool to use.
Sure.
Both practically and politically, frankly, because we don't do it that way. That is the problem. So that's the only, I'm willing to try it. I think it's doable with some way of, we're fretting about the what ifs. What if this, because I can see that we'll get, because I would say, and I'm not going to name it in the sheriff's department necessarily, but we have employees that work for other elected officials that I've been told before, I don't work for you. You can't tell me anything. Right. And that happens. Sure. And so this would be no different. It'd be like, once we hand this off and, when you say you get all the complaint, that's true in that people do call 911 or they call law enforcement, but they also call us. Sure. About things that we don't have any control. And this would be one thing that they would, if there was bad interaction, we will get it, and we would have zero oversight other than just to have a conversation with the elected official that the department's under and say, we're getting these complaints. What are you going to do about it? And it's, in some ways, yeah, it would be nice to be able to say, oh, it's not my monkey, not my circus.
I was gonna say, there's some of that. That would be nice.
That would be nice.
But it would still come back on you anyway.
It will. They already feel, there's a lot of constituents already feel like that they're getting passed around back and forth between people, and we are supposed to work as a team to get things done.
Does our prosecutor have any thoughts, if he's still back there?
He's behind the post. Nope. Okay. I haven't heard from, You must have, what were we talking about? Buildings and grounds. You heard?
No,
Yeah.
I got the email and I'm like, whoa.
Actually, we were just talking about. that.
We were, that's what I half expected. That everybody's on Zoom, like, you better get
Yeah,
over
but-
there.
If you're not in the meeting, you might be picking
Yeah,
up
yeah.
trash.
Yeah. Do you, as we get back where we were, the reference to buildings and grounds was the, in the future, one of the things we would look at is perhaps doing abatements ourselves using county employees. As we have done, I was giving the example of, we've hired a carpenter, and it really grew out of, we either couldn't get anybody to bid on anything, or the numbers were, we could do it ourselves for quite a bit less. And so that's what we were talking about, the potential, if we're allowed, there's still some questions that we have to answer if we're even allowed to do that, use our own folks to do abatements. I mean, personally, I don't see any issue as long as I think the concern was about, because we do charge for that, because that's how we do it now, that charge goes against that property. If it doesn't get paid, it gets assessed as a tax lien, and you either pay it in 3 years or you are subject to foreclosure, which we have done before, unfortunately. And that was always the kind of the backstop, because we would generally, the abatements, the property was worth at least as much as the abatement cost. Well, then we found that's not true anymore, because our abatement costs had spiraled to the point where it cost 3 times as much to clean up the property than it was worth.
Right.
And so we are literally losing money doing it. Yes, sir.
Can you clarify the 3 years to pay off the lien before we foreclose?
Because it is put on as we have the option, we've always chosen to, we can do it as a general obligation. I'll again defer to counsel if I'm misspeaking, but we have done that, which means it's like a judgment. It's no different than anything else, and it really doesn't have
They
any
pay
teeth.
it when they pay it.
They pay it when they pay it, or we can choose to do it as a tax, it's put onto your tax bill, just like
Interesting.
and then you either pay it, or in 3 years you are in arrears and you are subject, goes through the process that the treasurer does.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was just a general lien.
Oh,
Be
no,
there for
that's
20
the
years and-
teeth as
Okay.
far as, so. In fact, part of those surplus property sale that we just had, except for the one in Lyle, the sheriff's
Yeah.
one, that's what those were. It was just cleaning up the stuff that we had foreclosed on from either the one in Wish Ram was an abatement that we did, there was one before in Klickitat that we had done, and quite often it ends up that it's economically, the people, it's like, well, it's cheaper for me to just, here's the property, because it costs more, and we're out the difference. It's not like they're still on the hook for the difference. It's against the property, so.
Yeah, I would say 6 months ago, a year ago, I loved the idea of this being in the sheriff's department. That was my push the whole time. Honestly, recent issues have brought concerns to that. So, I mean, I like I said, I still think it's the right place for it. It's just giving up if we don't think it's working correctly, now we get to have a public fight over how to manage it. And I don't want to have a public fight over how to manage nuisance abatement. Code enforcement.
Rebecca, is there any other places other than Chelan County that was the sheriff's department? Are all the rest of them in building, or is there anywhere else that they're housed in, like their own thing, or community economic development or anything like that?
Most of it looked to be in building departments. Some counties have like a combined planning and building, and they've carved out sort of sub offices within that department and held it there. I haven't found any, and I can look further. I was really focused on where they have done the sheriff's, transferred it over to the sheriff's office when I was searching.
Okay, I haven't heard from planning yet, so she's like, I'm not
As
sure.
long as you don't house it in planning.
Planning.
My main concern is I want to be sure wherever we transfer this position, it's going to continue to be a centralized location. It's not going to split among different departments. Because I believe we'll continue to work with this person.
Right.
Because we are the subject matter expertise. We, just like before, we are part of that process. But I think it's important to have this centralized location. So if anyone wants to know the status of the case, they can only contact this one person. It doesn't need to, call 3 different departments to find out where we at. Because a lot of time it's more than just planning issues. Other departments will get involved as well. So that's my only concern, and I think the discussion so far, this is going to be a centralized location. We're just not sure which department is going to be under.
Maybe we'll put it under the commissioners as a code compliance and public records officer.
Yeah. Like I said, there is value to being in the sheriff's department because they know how to do an investigation. They know how to write a citation. They know how to testify in court. There's a lot of pluses there. If I can get over the risks.
What are your thoughts, Dave?
Like I said, I'm willing to try it. There's a lot of value to it as far as for those things. I'm just trying to figure out is there a way that we can still have some short of the, nuclear options.
Yeah, because that's what it would be. We just have to say, hey, next year, we're not paying for that position.
Right. We're going
And
to
that's
eliminate
how
or
we would
take
have
it
to-
back.
Yeah, that's how we'd have to do it.
I mean, I guess it would be no different than although we saw what, the recent discussion that was raised over management of the jail. Say that is not a mandated, that is not a required that department is under the sheriff's department. It's in many places in the state, it's not. But it's anytime that's even, which first off, I have no interest. Let's be clear. I'm just using that as an example. That is something that there's a lot of confusion out in the public about that is like, that it's, if a board was considering that is a, doing something that's improper, that is like trying to pull authority away from another elected official, even though that isn't actually true, that conflict doesn't already exist. I don't want this would be the same thing where this is not, and it's like, yeah, that used to be under the board, but now it's in the sheriff's department. And so if it just didn't work for some reason, that it's now we've created another one of those situations where a board or a future board was like, we don't think that's working, or we want to do it. And so we're going to take that back in our house, and we're going to park it over here, and the planning director is going to run the whole thing, and Public Works is going to do the whole thing. Yeah.
I woke him up.
Yeah, you woke
He
him
was
up.
looking at his phone.
Then it causes all this, firestorm over it, which it's really a non-issue because that's not that. And so trying to find a way to, because I like because for those hard things, law enforcement already has all that training, has been said. That's the thing, is like you can build the case, you can do it right, you end up in court, because there's due process things with this that have to be followed, or we can't move to the next step. And we've had issues before, because again, this isn't something that we typically do. And unfortunately, I think the times have changed in that I think our old approach where was more the, Mayberry, where you just, Sheriff Andy goes out and has a discussion about, you need to clean your stuff up. And that will still work for lots of people, but we also now, people are different, and they're more combative. They're not interested in they don't care what the community thinks. And so a lot of those kind of soft tools that we used to work are ineffective on those, the hard line people where it really is, it's going to be it's going to be an enforcement issue for that small little piece. And if we're doing that, you have to follow all the rules. And because if you don't, if you make a mistake, now you have to start over again. And that's, and we've had that happen. And yeah, I'm willing to, I'd be willing to try it anyway. And so maybe that's what we do is maybe we do it, we could try it as a pilot, maybe as a year.
My worry about that is if he takes a road deputy, turns them into a detective, rehires as road deputy, how do you take that position away in a year if the trial doesn't work? Because now you have one too many law enforcement.
You're just upfront about that from the beginning, any more than we fund grant positions all the time that we always say, and maybe 1 year is not fair because that's maybe we say it's a longer period that, and maybe the way you built it into is the thing, it actually has a sunset on it, where unless you proactively do something, this will go away in 2 years or 3 years or whatever, or sooner. I don't know, because it's.
The other thing is there's a lot of retirements that are planning on coming up in the next 3 to 5 years. So I think if it's a position that you fund and then we get to a point where somebody retires and the position's not working out, then we make changes at that time.
Right.
That way nobody's losing their job. It's not like we're.
Right, that's my thing. I don't want to take something away.
Yeah, and that would be my concern if it was.
And I don't picture, Detective Billy Bob wanting to go to work in the building department once we take it away, if we ever took it away.
Yeah,
So that's
there's a huge
my
incentive
worry
for them
that I
to
don't
stay
want
in what we're doing.
And I don't want to
But
not
with-
fund somebody that's been there either. So.
With the changes in the laws, a lot of guys who might have tried to go a little longer are kind of saying, okay, how soon do I get to retire now? So that's
I understand that.
upcoming issues there.
So there's the other thing is that if you transfer somebody over, whoever starts, a lot of your officers get overtime.
Right.
And that's not gonna be the case in this situation.
No, if they did, it would be for it would be to cover patrol stuff, and there's a different budget for that. So this would be probably like a 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. type of thing, so that if they have to go make contact in the evening times, where there's boards or things they had to go to, Monday through Thursday would probably be their schedule, and they would have to worry about weekends, unless it's covering patrol stuff or other things, which would actually help the sheriff's office.
But then you're also gonna be thinking it's not gonna be a step 1 through 3, it's gonna be somebody who's probably been there a few years. So you figure if it starts out at 26, they're probably already making 30, close to 30 right now. They
So there will be a budget.
Or potentially,
There will be.
it might be close to being topped out.
or even closer. So you have someone in mind, huh?
I have a few people in mind, but the experience is invaluable sometimes. Paying a little bit more money for the right person to do it, as opposed to just taking, well, it'd be cheaper if we went this route. And then in 6 months, the complaints are flying in because the person's not working out. I think experience.
You have a couple people in mind. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but since you're in here and our sheriff isn't, and you have a couple people in mind, is this your baby?
So far it's been, but I have brought the sheriff involved in on, I've talked to
Your
him. That's where.
understanding, you think it's your baby.
So my initial position was that this would be separate, not a commission position. And the more that the sheriff and I talked about, like, hey, you really need somebody with experience. You need somebody with the full authority, somebody that's been through, maybe not this exact process, but maybe processes.
My worry with putting somebody in there was putting in Joe Blow civilian,
Right.
handing him authority and telling him to not use that authority. I thought that was very dangerous.
So law enforcement,
to
it's a
have
long.
somebody trained is a big change for them.
Yeah, law enforcement, we have a lot of people that come to us. Do you think I'd be a good cop? I want to be a cop. Can I do it? And there's a long process, and there's all the stuff that they have to go through for hiring. Then they go through an academy. They're challenged at the academy. At any point in time, if something doesn't work out at the academy, they can release them from that. Then we put them through an FTO process, which is where they go out with a field training officer. They go through the stuff. They have to demonstrate that they know how to do the job. then they're put on the road by themselves and they're monitored pretty well. And they still have a probation of 1 year period from that. And if there's anything that comes up in that period of time, you know, it's pretty easy to get rid of them during that first initial stage. So these are people that have been challenged. They've gone through, they've shown this different, you know, the skills that they can do these things.
So how do we ensure if we create the position in the sheriff's office and the position is funded for that, that person is, that's what they're actually doing? Because again, it's back to the oversight.
And that's,
I mean, because we can't, like, we don't, we obviously go through the budget process every year. We fund positions. We have no, I have no, we fund so many road deputies, so many this, so many that. We don't have any oversight over they actually get used in those.
Yeah, I can
Thanks.
see in the budget that, Randy is, so much for deputy and so much for Marine.
right,
But I don't know how many hours he's there.
right.
And so it comes back to I'm not anticipating a problem, but
No.
then when if there was a problem and the public's saying, hey, we keep calling, they're not doing anything. Well, we had an emergency and we were using the person on this, or we were using on that. And because it's a big county. It's a very sparsely, it's sparsely people are spread out, and we do have public safety emergencies, and it's very easy to people get diverted and we would have zero oversight over that.
So my concern with that was if we had,
The other people are listening to
oh,
it.
absolutely, yeah. So my concern with that is if we had if we were to take that on and then it's, say a year down the road, we don't have enough people to fill that position. So we're gonna have the regular deputies handle these complaints. The deputies are already extremely busy as it is.
Right.
So literally it's okay, I go take the complaint, well, here's your ticket, and that was not the direction that we wanted this to go, is that there needs to be gaining compliance and things of that nature first. So that's where I came up with the idea, instead of a deputy doing this, a uniform position doing that, it's a detective that does it because they're not part of regular patrol. Is there a chance that we're gonna have a homicide and everybody else is busy, they're gonna have to do it? Yes, that is always the risk in our job, is we have to balance all of the needs of the public.
Sure.
That is a specific need, the code compliance issues, the nuisance issues, those are very specific. And so it would be a specific position where the patrol deputies, somebody would call in and say, here's what's going on. Excellent. They write something up and they send it to that detective. So that would require the detective sergeant really making sure that, hey, this is not in the purview of that detective to do. He's got his own assignment. And we've done things like that before. We had, we were just getting absolutely inundated with civil papers. So they took a deputy and moved him in there, and that's all that deputy did. They didn't handle calls. They didn't make traffic stops. All they did was civil papers, because they were doing in excess of, I think, like 1,000 civil papers over a year's time, which doesn't seem like a lot in the big picture, but when you have to drive from this end of the county to that end of the county and you're trying to get all this stuff in.
Is there any way we can be assured that posse will not be involved as a ride along, or because that's not going to go well in the community?
I'm sure I could talk to the sheriff about that, about maybe getting a policy where the posse's not involved in that side. I see the posse as a benefit, though.
In a lot of
So
ways,
if there was a time, like I think somebody brought up about somebody that wanted to clean up their property that couldn't afford to, and I suggested that maybe that would be a good volunteer opportunity for some of the posse members.
Right, and I have no problem with that. I'm talking about actually going out and making contact with the.
No, it would need to be a detective.
Right.
That's doing that. It would need to be somebody doing the initial stuff. There's no calls that we send a posse to go do an initial contact anyways. The posse only assists if there's things that we need, and we've had various things where it's like, hey, let's get some volunteers together, and then we bring those volunteers in, but the main person is the deputy or the detective, or whatever the position may be.
keep in mind, you're dealing with a workforce that's represented. You cannot make these decisions unilaterally with the represented workforce. So you're going to have to bring them to the table and get their agreement to vastly expand their work duties to include responding to civil issues like code compliance. In addition, the board needs to keep track of the fact that commission law enforcement under much more restricted ability to interact with the public than a non-commissioned civilian would have, both under existing statutory framework and case law. And it's clear the trend of the legislature is to further constrain that ability. So some of the laws taking effect Monday would, it's going to be a reorientation of whoever is selected to take this position. It's going to have to basically forget all their law enforcement training on how to do this job. And they're still going to be under the limitations of how they can interact. They can't just go on people's, generally, they're not going to be able to interact to the degree that a civilian can. Because they have the ability to deprive someone of their liberty, so they're under greater restrictions.
And I wouldn't bargain this separately from the general bargaining we're going to be doing fairly heavily in September. I mean, I wouldn't approach the union with a single issue 30 days before you approach them with
the whole
the
thing.
whole thing.
Right.
Because, one, they may not do it, two, wouldn't be to our advantage. So I wouldn't formally commit to it until after negotiations. Wow, recommend you not.
Makes it.
Great point.
Yeah.
Speed bump, another speed bump. There's always unintended consequences.
That's right.
Even when you're trying to do the right thing.
The thing that I'm worried about, if it's a commissioned officer on top of all that, is that when you're looking at every day, you have to use your discretion on what's most important. Where will this fit ever on that line of what's most important, these type of things versus what they're dealing with? And I know what our detectives deal with all the time. And I can easily see that person being like, okay, I'm going to take it, I'm going to write it, and then I'm going to farm it off to Mochi to go deal with it. And then once she gets it all done, she'll send it back to me and I'll write it something else, which is exactly what Mochi said she didn't want. When we started into this conversation, my goal was that this is a facilitation position that can help people become in compliance with code or get as close to potential compliance as possible, that make the neighbors happy and the community okay. And it's time consuming if you're doing it right. Using a commissioned officer who we spent this much time, effort, and money training and getting them to that point.
And they're going to be under one set of, sounds like anyway, they're going to be under one set of rules when they're doing this and another set of rules when they're out on the street.
And how do you take one hat off and put another one on?
It's difficult.
It is really difficult.
Well, I'm not even sure that they actually ever can take the other hat off. I don't know. I think if you're, so it's like you're actually working under that hat all
They
the
have
time.
permission, they have the ability to price on they're under
Those rules, period.
And then you're showing.
So that might be back to having a discussion with the sheriff about maybe commissioned is not because of that.
Right.
And then the other question is, if it's under the commissioners, who's going to be their manager? Is it going to be the three of us, or is it underneath the clerk of the board? I mean, where would that sit? You know what I mean?
Well, you also have to figure out where's their office space, whether they're in
Worry
that
about all the-
department or
yeah,
not,
yeah,
but yeah.
We can find it in the spot. That's not
Can I,
Yeah, but there's gotta be.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
sorry, since we're on the subject of discretion, a little bit of an issue that I talked at length with a deputy prosecutor over in Chelan about is the discretion when calls or complaints come in, because we're talking about all code violations here. So someone has a house, 2 feet over versus the property that's spewing with trash, leaking septic. There's a level of discretion that's exercised before the matter is even pursued further and farmed out to the other departments to work with that appointed individual, the code compliance officer. So one of the, I wouldn't say issues Chelan has been having, but one of the the things they have been working on extensively is training when to pursue complaints and when not to. But that discretion, until it's is in the sheriff's office, it's their discretion, whether they choose not to pursue a complaint or they choose to pursue it. They have full autonomy at that point to do so. And so that's been one of the issues they've been working through with this change. So the hearing, let's say they have a hearings examiner, but the board, when something gets referred for what type of formal action should be taken, there's checks and balances at that point. But before that, that discretion is really with the sheriff's office at this point.
Thank you.
That is a concern of mine as well.
And that discretion will be overseen by one individual, whereas the board, it takes 3 on staggered electoral terms. So
Right.
there's much more likelihood of consistency and even application. There can be radical shifts from one personality to another. The next sheriff could very well want nothing to do with this.
That is something that's brings up, because you never know if the next sheriff wants to enforce these things, but not these things, and there's nothing we can do about that.
So I will say, when we first came on board January, February, we were not looking at code compliance violations. We were underneath this thing. We had some issues come in with septic. And so I got involved and talked to the landowners. Another one was with the land that was potentially could landslide into another property. And when a commissioner calls, people seem to want to jump on board and help. And it went, all went really smoothly, where sometimes, staff, you just get roadblock after roadblock. And if it's underneath us, then whenever they're having an issue, they can come to us, whoever's district it is or whoever, and ask us to have a conversation with the people as well. That can be a benefit. It's just going to be more work and more time and more effort, and more oversight on our part. It's not like we don't have enough to do anyways. So just food for thought.
Yeah, I guess I'd say, why doesn't this model work, but only why, coming into this, when we started, again, I like the law enforcement piece as far as for those difficult people, but I do, my thought was that we don't really change things a whole lot, other than we have a code compliance department and we hire a person and they work directly for the board. It's more work for us because now we're managing another person, and they're that person, and they go and do that. And they also, they interact with the departments that are the subject matter experts when it's something that they do, except it being under a director, they're under the board of commissioners. Also, and I'm assuming in the past, there has been interactions with law enforcement when it's been appropriate, when we've had I know the, previous, code compliance officers, sometimes they would coordinate with law enforcement because they had to go out on site, and this has been this is the bad folks, and that worked, where they would, they only used that when they had to. The piece where I think we've had a problem is more with the making sure that we're following all the steps and doing the processes right, so that we can get to that when we end up upstairs asking for something, that there's that everything is up to snuff, so that we don't have any legal problems, and it's like, oh, that's thrown out because you didn't check this box. And it just moves the difficulties that we're back to. We have to hire somebody that's got all these wonderful characteristics, and they work for us.
So,
I mean, I don't want to, because I don't want it, but it is our responsibility. I mean, it really is. This is something we're supposed to be doing. And And in a sense, in the past, it's been, the board had it, because code compliant, this is not something that dates back into the 1800s. This was in the last 20 years that, or 25 years that they've been doing. And it was housed in the building department from the beginning, just because that's where it was. There's no reason.
Short straw.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you calling her short?
No.
That's what you're gonna be telling her?
No, but her predecessor was, I probably was here when that happened. And he was, and
He's part of, he and Tim O'Neill and
right,
whomever else at the time are the ones that worked through
but
it
it worked through it.
over
And
about
so,
a 2-year process.
but it was, I'm sure, thinking back, it was the board was like, well, because I'm sure there was discussion then about this position being a standalone position that was another department that answered to the board. And it's like, oh, Lord, no, let's, you raised first then.
It was close, you were close second. I would go so far as to say we were talking about making it a somehow temporary type of position under the sheriff. Under us, that's easy. You know, we could give it a trial run for a year under us and say, yeah, no, this isn't working, and reevaluate it. So that eliminates that potential issue.
Go ahead.
So we also have another one is rather than just being underneath us, we could do the same thing we did with Jen. We could put it under Rob in that department.
Why do you think he's here?
To say no. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yeah, you're on the menu.
So, but that's an option. But I mean, if we do that, remember, I always started with, I want this to be a facilitation position. I think facilitation, each department does a great job facilitating. We have the pre-application conferences and all that, but from what I've heard, people don't feel like we do a good job individually of supporting people, you know, through the process for their individual part of the process. But when you come in for some, whether it be a CUP or just a development or something, and it's your first time, it's a daunting process. And I see this position as not only doing the code compliance, code enforcement, but could also be the one that can help shepherd people through the process and be that single point of contact when you have questions and all that. That's how I originally envisioned it. And the more, you know, I think about it, that would be great. And we could do it underneath us for a year. And if it's working out great. If it's like they need more support, we could stick it under Rob. If they're dealing with a lot more on the nasty side, then we could shove it over to the sheriff's department. But at least then we have a little bit of control of it for a while, and then we can move it where it needs to go.
The negative, if it's under us, is we're automatically the bad guys on everything that didn't get nuisance abated within a week. The commissioners are evil.
We already
I know,
Already
that's
are,
what I'm
so.
saying, but if it's under the sheriff's department, I can point to him. But I think we need to have that under us, and we need to have that responsibility, and I think that it would allow us to have a closer working relationship with that compliance officer, so they know where we are at any given time. And it would also help us have control over that position, including in the hiring process, to make sure we get that facilitator that we're looking for.
And the other thing is when it comes to discretion, we have 170, 100 and something cases currently open. And whoever we hire has a big backlog. And if it's underneath us, we can set the priority on which ones you work for.
I said, that's where I'm leaning for temporarily. I'm not giving up on the sheriff's department idea or giving it back to Lynn, but I think we need to have control and the oversight.
I've given up on the thought of giving it back to Lynn.
Oh, I still want to hold that over for a little while.
No. Please don't.
So we still got to start working on the language, the amendments, all the changes. We just really needed the direction for Rebecca and I and whoever else is involved on how we're going to start.
Well, I want to look at fees too and make sure.
We've been talking about the fees.
$100 fine to somebody is monstrous, but to somebody else, that's chump change. I'll do that every Saturday.
Was true, the speeding ticket too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the speeding ticket, you have a stepped up, don't you, where eventually you don't have a
Depends
license
on the
anymore?
speed, not based on your ability.
But your insurance will change. So the more, if you got a ticket every week, then.
And if you're Jeff Bezos, who cares?
I don't think Jeff Bezos is our code, or is our abatement issue.
Yeah.
But, or Jake
You can afford more
Bezos,
tickets than
like,
you can afford.
yeah.
I could afford to deal with more nuisance than you could.
So we can't have some stepped up signage that, you know, on your fourth offense, it's.
You can stagger it, do it. I mean, that's.
Because we talked about that, and it really is, it's this, you know,
We already have that, where there's increasing infraction costs.
right. We just have not utilized it because, again, the process has to.
I would like to look at, with them, look at where we can go and how far we can go. And it doesn't mean we have to get to level 10, but with some people, you might have to get to level 10.
Okay, well, it sounds like we have consensus about the big question of we keep it. Again, that's where I started, but then I was willing if others were. So it would be an employee, it'd be under the commissioners. So we would obviously hire them. And they would be the facilitator and work with the, which is planning, health, building, law enforcement, everything really.
I think the other good thing is if it's underneath our direct supervision, what we're telling the community is we are taking this.
We're serious,
Right.
right?
Yeah, because we have to do something. It is unacceptable that we have, but I think one of this person, whoever this person is that we're gonna have to sit down and look at those 170 cases and have a hard conversation about and go back to the folks that filed and said, you know, some of these, I'm sorry, we have limited resources and this is just not, and I frankly, from my interactions with folks, I've seen the list of 170. I'm not going to pick any of them out, but I would say going forward, part of the control is things shouldn't get put on a list.
Sure.
Is that we have set unrealistic expectations of people, and
Right.
you witnessed it in Lyle at that, where it's like I had to have. That's the conversation that needs to happen. We are not going to go in and tell people they have to cut their grass and limb their trees up. I'm sympathetic. I don't have that kind of authority. I don't believe we do. And it's the easy thing to say is like, file a complaint and we'll look at it. No. Manage it up front and just tell them, I can't stop you from filing a thing. Go ahead, but that's not going to go anywhere because that's not something that we have the resources to take care of. We have to put our resources towards, raw sewage running down the
And
ditch.
we have to train our guy to have priorities.
Right. And that's,
Or girl, sorry.
or girl, could be.
I
We've had some
prefer
really good
girl.
girls in
I
that
say I
role.
prefer one, but
Let's just go with first.
yeah.
Sorry. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping me politically correct.
Yes, gender neutral language, people. person.
So should we bring Robin, because we're looking at changing job classification?
Yeah.
So are you thinking it should be me, Rebecca, and Rob? Do you still want to be involved? I mean,
Whatever you guys need.
Do you see any issue with, right, because that's going to be, because we can pull the language from the existing position, but I think this is a little different too.
Just rewrite it and run it through the classification committee if we need to and assign it to wherever it's gonna go.
And then my bars numbers and all that would just go,
Right.
shift from here to here.
Understanding the dollar figures that
It
are in
goes
your
with it.
budget.
I
is
know,
what-
yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
I was
I'm
gonna say,
good.
that brings up a whole nother question, is this code facilitator gonna have to be in charge of their own budget processing and be a semi-accountant as well now? Or are we gonna give them a little help on that?
Who's we?
We are the boss of that person.
I know, but I don't do any counting for anybody else.
I know, but we have people.
We have people that do.
They're not gonna have people is my.
You'll
point.
figure that out. Yeah, no, good point as far as, there, and then
We're gonna put that in
staffs
the job
the,
description that you have to understand Kayenta?
I think the other thing that we need to have consolidated agreement is we are not talking about nuisance here. We're talking about all code compliance, and this
Right.
is going to be a code compliance.
Right. I agree.
And what we'll do is we'll take out of the county code, we'll take all the code compliance sections and put it in one section so that for the public, it's easy to understand that this is code compliance, this is its own title for code compliance, and these are the fines and fees and everything and how to get through it and make it user-friendly as the government can.
And hopefully get something on a web page on there too, so it can be online and easy to access for people.
Good thing about the fiscal part is we're gonna be building a new budget. It'd be a good time to add a new department or move stuff to where it's gonna go and natural time to do all of it.
Yeah,
And whether this person's gonna have administrative support, where those resources are gonna come from, the cost of
Right.
that.
So you've already up to 2.
You need to look at job descriptions, reclassifications for an existing position that includes this in the job description, and their classification status is based on that responsibility. Since that's been removed, they need to evaluate that.
Right.
It's always so easy.
Thanks, Dave.
how do we all end up on formal plaid today, by the way?
Yeah, that is bizarre.
Hey, at least
You
I
worry
didn't
about
pick
all the
red. I almost
important
picked red, then it would have looked really bad.
Don't need a vehicle. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
It's coming with the change too. So-
Right, that's the only reason I.
I have a feeling I'll find a few vehicles.
And we're
during the
taking a
budget
nice
process.
vehicle since you're giving up the position.
I only have 2 right now because I'm still waiting on my replacement.
Yeah.
So next year's potential.
Yeah, when the person
replacement-
comes on board, they get the nice new replacement.
No.
I'm
Jean gets that one.
kidding.
You can get the Colorado or the SUV, but
So we might have a fleet by then, so we won't have to worry about giving that person a vehicle. We'll have a fleet to choose from.
Okay,
Okay. anything else on
Rebecca, do you
this
have any
topic?
questions for my seatmates since you and I are gonna have to be moving on this?
No, I think, you know, the Chelan title, which is its own regarding enforcement, is pretty comprehensive and probably a good starting point. I'm going to look around at other counties before we meet again. But they definitely have it set up, regardless of where it sits, their setup is that there is this one point person and they work with the various departments, but they also have the ability to do liens, infractions, nuisance abatements. All those options are put in the single title so that folks know when they start this process what they're looking at if they don't comply. And I think that should hopefully, you know, encourage people when this comes up to take care of the issues. But I think, you know, Chelan has some good starting language that I can bring to you and we can work with, and I'll look for other counties as well.
So then the last one I have on that is that in the current code, we have a nuisance board of appeals.
In
It's-
the current or the one we made?
The one that just got pulled, the nuisance board of appeals, is
Former current.
it's something that's underneath us to appoint people to. Most of the people that are on it have never had a meeting that I know of. Do we want to keep that, or if it's underneath us, the appeals come to us and we make the decision?
What was its
First and foremost,
function? Yeah,
Is there?
it's never been
legality
used
issue
in
with
my
that?
career here.
What's that?
currently not been utilized, but the purpose behind it was if someone thought they were being unfairly treated, when we said you have to clean up this stuff.
So that's the appeal of the board.
then
So like
they
it comes to
go
us and the board says, yeah, we authorize abatement, and that was their appeal step?
No,
No, it went, before it went to us, it could go to that board. In essence, it's giving citizen oversight over the county employee for their decision.
Isn't that our role?
Well, that was my
Well,
question,
it was
is how should we
taking, it was
write?
taking stuff off our plate is what it was doing.
but it was only, I mean, they would have to appeal it within so many days of us going and saying, this is a whole bunch of trash. Or from my understanding, if you ruled that, yes, that is trash, they could still go to the nuisance board and say, well, I don't agree with them. And then the nuisance board could say yes.
Could overrule the board of commissioners?
I don't know. I mean, I've never used it.
That sounds unlikely.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's go the other way.
Yeah,
They
I've never
appeal
used it.
the nuisance board to us,
Yeah,
but
right.
hopefully the nuisance board.
Yeah, I would think they would be an interim step.
So
We
we
would
would have to
just
deal with it.
jump to the final.
But
So it's,
in the whole time I've worked there, it's it's never ever been.
I was gonna say, I don't
Okay.
necessarily see a need for it.
Rebecca, did you have a comment on that?
I was just gonna say, I think that's right. It would be appealed to the nuisance board and then to you, gentlemen. You know, Chelan has a process of it gets appealed to their hearing examiner, which they have, and then to a LUPA and then to Superior Court. So there's these avenues if people are not happy with the decision to appeal. And so that's what's been done up there. But I believe that's where the nuisance board came in. I don't think it's ever been utilized that I've seen either.
No, generally it comes
So am I hearing
directly to,
consensus that
Yeah,
just bring it to us?
bring it to us.
The other thing we have to figure out is training. How do we train somebody for this? But that's a down the road issue. Something to think about.
That's Rob's problem.
Well, they're gonna need training from her and from him and really from
Yeah.
him. And
Which I think is probably gonna be something that's really great is if they go spend some time in each one of these departments, then they're gonna be a better facilitator for the things that come in. And it'll be a nice process if we can keep them long enough that they can become, effective, truly effective.
Okay.
Anything else, Rebecca, that you have questions to make it easier on us when we're drafting?
Nope, not at this time. Thank you.
thank you, Rebecca, for all your work on this.
Of course, happy to help.
One comment.
Yes, one comment.
So Lena and I had this discussion. I actually approached her. If this code compliance officer is going to transfer out of the building department, in the new building, I'd like to take that office for my senior planner.
There you go.
Wow, first up.
You don't
even-
even-
Wow. That was quick.
She won't have adequate space, and since we're all in one centralized area, it makes sense.
So I just want to,
Is this for the?
She just wants to be the
senior
first one to
planner
ask for that office space.
Is this for the long range planner position?
that's
Okay.
right, because when he was designed,
We didn't have
I
that
didn't have
position.
that extra. So right now I have to put this new person or any one of my planner in the storage space that was assigned.
I'm going for a tour recording 15 minutes. I know where there's an office.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense because
I know
you
where
had a
there's one
space
too,
for
and
it.
you got a
Exactly.
If
window.
we're pulling it out of the building department and you guys share space,
Share space, right.
that makes total sense.
And it's already set up as an office,
Right.
so why couldn't?
It's already in the shared space between the two
Correct.
departments.
So then we have to find the spot for this person.
We are. But if they're under the commissioner, they can have mine. I don't care. I'll work out of my car. I don't have any room either.
Your department's full.
We could set up a tent on the roof.
Yeah, tent on the roof for me.
Well, I hear there's one
It might have been Brenda's
for
fault.
WSU extension.
Hmm?
Window seat.
Yeah, go with Gordy. Go find it. Go find us a space for the. It's brand new. We're not even done. And we are out of room.
Yeah, I was gonna say those offices should have been built a little smaller so you can get an extra one or two in each one.
Typically, when you design them 2 years ahead, but 10 years
Yeah.
later, things have changed.
Let's find
Another day. We have other things to
Brenda's
talk
here.
about. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks. Did you get your donut, Mr. Tim?
That's true.
I'll
I will
pass up
now.
a donut, brother.
This maple bar was
Love-
staring at me.
Oh, now
Are
you're
they all
gonna take
maple
my
bar?
roll. I ate the other maple bar. I was hoping that maple bar would still be around. I didn't know everybody liked maple bars.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, I think we have a direction on that topic.
It seems so easy, such an easy topic to fix when you get an email that, they know how to fix it in 5 paragraphs.
Oh, you read
And
that.
we have trouble doing it, so.
Let me see, Lynn gives up something, gets a new car, and Mochi gets a new office. I'm thinking those two know how to negotiate.
Yeah, I'm thinking there was some background.
My new car's on order, I just
Oh,
don't know if it's gonna come this year or not.
There you go.
It
It's
just
on
now
order.
got a VIN number assigned.
Okay.
All right. Well, we will move on.
I know, but he's like, I don't know when you're gonna.
Hi, Brenda.
What?
Good morning.
She wants to speak to you.
Okay, go ahead. Come on up.
Receipt.
We're still gonna continue.
I'm not giving out.
We're not
any more
done
notices
yet.
this morning.
Oh.
Because
so I
we're,
can
that was,
wait.
no, we're all morning.
Yeah.
We still have short-term rentals,
Okay.
RVs.
Mochi thought she was done, she was gonna go
Yeah,
decorate her
she
new
was gonna
office in
go
there.
So
Yeah.
this will be short. Susie, our audit lead, she wants to know if the board wants an official entrance conference this year. With the database delays, it might be best to skip the entrance conference because they wouldn't be able to hold one till the first or second week in August, leaving us roughly a month left on the audit because they've bumped it out a couple of weeks because of this. So it won't be done the end of August, probably the middle of September. She's asking that I speak with the board and know what you want to do. And if you decide to skip the entrance, they will provide the normal packet that they provide. The little history on this is we had a little glitch trying to get to do the close and roll. So we had all of the information and the data, and then we had okay, so the person that needed to upload the data is no longer with us, and the other person that was designated wasn't here, and there was some miscommunication. So now there's some difficulty with the new server communicating, trying to get the data to them, our financial data. So that's where we sit.
Could you, for the benefit of my seatmates, maybe explain what the entrance conference is and what its purpose? I'm fine with skipping it. I've had.
Well, and that's what I wondered with the new board.
Yeah.
Usually they come in or they're virtual, depending, and they announce who they are and what they do and the purpose of their audit, which is all explained in the paperwork, the packet that they usually just read
to us.
Yeah, and give you the cost of the audit, the estimated cost, and where the areas are going to be covering. They've already expanded, in my opinion, a couple of the areas they told me to originally that they were going to be covering. So
What areas are those?
grants, they were just gonna do the COVID grant. Then they did a highway planning grant that was fine, and now they're on seniors, which there's a lot of questions on that one. I don't know if they're covering all of the COVID grants or just the main grant, or because anyway. So that's how it is. And then they tell you what the areas are going to cover, which is also in all the paperwork that comes, right, Dave? I mean, yeah, tell me if I'm off base here.
No, you're right.
And the length, how long they anticipate being here, which that just changed last week.
So it's basically, apparently it's set up assuming that the board is illiterate. So
Pretty much, no.
go ahead. My email is
What's illiterate mean?
I hate people just showing up reading
Reading me
to
something,
that I can
just-
read
But they
myself.
do interact with some
Yeah,
questions.
you
and
can,
that.
you can
Yeah,
ask
there's
questions.
interactions. So I just don't know what direction. I got this email yesterday at 3:30 and I thought, perfect, the board's gonna be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
I'm fine with that. I mean, it's already underway. I mean, an entrance should be at the
yeah.
beginning.
it usually it's within 2 weeks of
Yeah.
when the audit, when they actually start doing their work and they've received their data and some other things. So
Yeah. So I think we're good.
just skip it, get the information and get it
Yeah.
to you.
Spend your time keeping us out of trouble.
I am actually working on the budget worksheet. So I stopped doing that to come down here and take care of this. So- Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Please, I mean no disrespect to the state auditors.
Oh, I know that.
If they're listening,
If they're listening, there's donut.
there's
There's
donuts.
donut.
Yeah.
If you can be bribed, there's donut.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm out
Have
of
a good
here.
day.
Back to your RVs and whatever, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Short-term rent, do we want to take short-term rental or
Thank
RV? This was really grew out of the workshops you folks have been having, so I'll defer while I get a donut. Start talking.
So
You pick a topic, one of the easy, pick an easy one.
Yeah, there's one of those on this list.
yeah, there's no
no
easy
bars.
one.
Well, Tim took the last one, you were late.
He was only supposed to take half. So with Rebecca and I working on code compliance, I think we can all agree that is most important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to get back to it and we need to get moving, and we need to get somebody hired. The RV and the short-term rental ordinances are supposed to make that person's job easier.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna be easier if we keep having more and more complaints come in and nobody there. I don't know what Rebecca, but she only has so much bandwidth to work on these things. She did a great job getting the comments on all of the drafts that we drafted up. We've got a long ways to go. I think it's going to take a little bit longer. I just heard this morning that the city of White Salmon just passed a moratorium on any new short-term rentals within city limits.
Really?
Just what I said.
Or
Huh?
why? Is there a
The
reason?
city council did it last night. I don't know if it was on the agenda or what.
Are
but-
they thinking that short-term rentals are
Part of the reason it's driving the cost of.
right because people just aren't living there and they're just nonstop renting their house, or
I don't know. I wasn't at the meeting.
criminals?
I just got the email. My first thought is it'll be interesting to see this play out. The mayor did say though that those who already have it are grandfathered in, and as long as they've actually applied for their registration, and then they're going to give like a 3-week little leeway. But I mean, with that going on over there, because that's where most short-term rentals are anyways, I'd say we let the city kind of work through
Figure
their
it
little
out.
thing.
Well, we have short-term rentals on this side that we absolutely love because they actually bring tourists to our side of the county, so.
Well, I was reading the same Facebook post you were, and some people are saying tourists are good, some people are saying tourists are bad in Golden Dale.
There is that on that page, yes.
Looking at substantial impact on the community, I lived in Hood River for years, and at that time, I lived downtown on Columbia Street. All my neighbors were short-term rentals, and it was just awful. They would come on the weekends, have these raging parties, be rude to the neighbors, leave trash, and then treat it like a hotel. And when the city cracked down on that, it made a huge difference in the quality of life for the people that actually lived there. There was families that began renting the places. There was kids that were in the neighborhood. The schools started getting more people. It was a wonderful improvement in the neighborhood. It was actually a community at that point.
Well, I guess I would have a question for you. If the state has essentially legalized short-term rentals, can we illegal them? Make them illegal, or is that?
There have been some challenges nationwide on some curtailing the ability of short-term rentals, and most of them have been upheld. They need to be reasonable, there needs to be a notice, but there is the ability to restrict short-term rentals. It's not blanket, and we need to do some further inquiry as to, the parameters of what's being considered to vet it, but as a starting point, there are legal ways to restrict short-term rental.
Well, if we want to restrict short-term rentals or not, right now we are, because essentially everything in this county, as far as I'm under the interpretation, is illegal if you have a short-term rental.
So there's,
If we want to restrict it or not work on it or whatever, we can also break the county up into pieces. Because what's good for one is not necessarily good for the other.
and the Gorge Commission did that based on zoning designations. And the Gorge Commission's pretty much shut down short-term rentals in anything but like a five acre lots, just random. I don't know why they picked that. But some interesting locations, and then when we look at, the question that we talked about, yesterday, whatever day it was, on this.
Every day's Monday.
Yeah, this week, yeah. Was whether, because Mochi is brought up that anything we do with short-term rentals will affect the code, so we'll have to open the zoning code. And so Rebecca's looking into, like, if it's one family in there or another family, it's still a single family dwelling, still a single family residence. Would we need to open up the zoning code to even do it? And so Rebecca's looking into that to see what others, because I don't think Skamania County opened the zoning code when they did their short-term rental ordinance. So I don't,
I said, I'm not looking to make short-term rentals illegal, and if we don't have an option for them, then this code facilitator we're hiring is gonna get called on, because the neighbor's renting their house, and that's again, let's get into private property rights. If you want to rent your damn house or your house. But if we are gonna do some not allowed in some parts of the county, let's not just blanket that across the whole county.
Well, I'd say for me, I mean, there's some policy discussion that needs to be had on this, because I think there is some, I'm not taking a position restricting, outlawing them or having them have everything just be wide open. Too, because we do manage, we plan, that's what the zoning code is for, we've thought through what people want in a given area, their neighborhood to look like. And there's a reason we don't. So in some sense, I'm a big advocate of private property rights, but we do restrict, you can't, we have density, we have different things that you can't. And the whole point of that is it's not a good fit in the community for what we want it to look like. And so the argument, and I don't know about white salmons, my point of view is just from watching the discussions in Hood River City over the need to restrict there was the community benefit part, as far as that the people, you have all these transitory people. It's not really a community if it's just a bunch of hotels together. But it also was around the issue with the cost of housing, that part of what they were trying to get at too was the housing stock. Some of it's just tied up in short-term rental, that it's not available for just ordinary families to rent. And so they were trying to find some kind of balance, which it's not it's not wide open. So they throttled things back. And I think they did do same thing where they set, basically how much and then no more over this, and the people that were already in legitimately are in, and then up to whatever that level was.
As I said, if you were permitting X number in the white salmon region, in the BZ region, in the Trout Lake region, in breaking it up like that, I have no issues. And I can fully understand where short-term rentals becomes a bigger problem. The closer you get to white salmon, or the closer you get to Trout Lake, or I get it, but just because they're there doesn't mean somebody shouldn't be able to have a short-term rental in the middle of Centerville.
Sure.
It's unlike what the prosecutor's saying. You're not dealing with a neighborhood full of short-term rentals.
Right.
And yeah, if you want to set a number to geographical regions.
That's what Bend did. The city of Bend did that. They said there can only be so many short-term rentals per square mile.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, I see it as
And
the same.
The first people in have the benefit, and
Right.
they're grandfathered in, and then the last people are shut out, and then.
And that's,
But that keeps it from becoming the whole neighborhood. But again, even then, I think I guess that would work, because even if you had, if you're looking at the white salmon side within a square mile, you might have.
Marty dressed for it.
I see that, you're ready. Go on a field trip.
You might have 100 houses in that square mile over there, where over here you've got 3. So what's the chances all 3 of them want to be a short-term rental?
I don't see any different. It's a similar issue to ADUs when we were, when the county was first discussing it, and we did a pilot, and there was all this. Everybody worried because they took the entire county and said, oh, you're doubling the density, and that will create 12,000 new ADUs across the county, and we haven't planned for that. How can you do that? It's like, okay, we also, if you took the whole build out of if you took the current zoning and maxed out everything, there would be 500 million people living here. And that's not, when we hit the first million, we'll talk about adjusting things.
I would say if we are going to set numbers to areas, that's a worry for me. If you're going to say, whatever, 5 people per mile, or, only 40 people in this region, or something like that, because there might be people already doing it that now don't make the list. I think you have to think of some way to say, okay, we have it open for whatever, 30 days, 90 days, whatever else. And then it's grandfathered why we come up with our numbers. So we can get those people on the books, find out who they are.
So my first thought is, City of White Salmon is a little different than the county proper. I mean, City of White Salmon, you've got the density, you've got the those things. The first and most important thing is we need just a way to register to find out where they're at. That's what the city did. That's what Skamania County did. They did their little pilot for a while, and then they start making rules and regulations once you figure it out.
Right.
We also have to take into consideration that we're making a significant amount of money on the lodging tax, and we're now handing that out, to continue this going. From health side, health doesn't care if it's one family in the house or the other family in the house.
Right.
Environmental health, it's the same septic, it's the same water, it doesn't matter. You're not adding density, you're not adding anything. So we need to.
How many do you think short-term rentals are out there that aren't going through VRBO or something like that and are literally just off the books and we're not getting tax revenue on it?
So either way, you're supposed to still, like, even
You're supposed
VRBO,
to.
VRBO, last I checked, didn't take the money. So you get the dollars and then you put it into the state, where Airbnb,
They're doing it.
they take it for you, send it to the
Directed.
state, and then the state sends it to us.
Right. I guess I would say my curiosity is how many people are renting their house off the books, not claiming it as taxes? And do you think actually getting a registration type of a program would increase the number of taxes?
I have no idea, but because we don't know, we can't track that down. But there's not
Inevitably, there's some.
yeah. Like there's always been like the Columbia Gorge Rentals group, and some of these real estate agencies have gotten into property management. There's Vacasa, but Vacasa, they're big, they've got their own website and everything, but they also, use Airbnb and everything else. And they do, direct rentals, but they turn in their money because they're a big business, So as you look at that, it all comes down to your marketing, You don't want to do the marketing for your rental, so you use these people.
I don't want to just leave it the way it is. That's just not an option for me. I don't mind restrictions, but I want to know how many are out there before we make restrictions.
There's quite a significant number of them. Under economic development, I think I was looking at like 150 in the county thereabouts.
I think there's hundreds when you look at it.
Side, if you go to look.
The issue is it's just so difficult because under our current regulatory scheme, they got to go through the land and do commercial, basically grade permitting, which is incredibly expensive.
Right. So if you're going to be legitimate, it's
Widespread non-compliance already.
Right,
So the key is, it's kind of like that's why we do road studies. If everyone's driving 70 miles an hour, then what are we doing with a 50-mile-an-hour limit?
Well, yeah, but I think-
But how did Skamania County in their law, they kind of sidestepped a lot of that?
I'm not sure how they went about it, because the
Because it was back to the, when we were talking before about the commercial, sprinkler,
Right.
that
They
you're
looked at it
basically,
as-
it's the same as the.
It's still
as
a single family dwelling. It's not a venue.
Right.
Venue's a different thing. And then they limited the occupancy based upon the number of bedrooms, that sort of thing. But, our understanding, Public Works understanding, when we have pre-subs with these people, was that I had to look at it as commercial. They'd have to do a conditional use. Now they have to bring the road up. I mean, that was our previous understanding. And then when Jacob asked me to do research, it's like, well, some of other areas have just kind of put in some verbiage of, if you meet these things, you're not considered a venue, you're not considered commercial, have fire extinguishers and show everybody where the windows are that you can get out of if the house catches on fire type approach. Is that anything, formal that they said, okay, citing these things? I don't know. I didn't look into it that deeply. I was just kind of doing a brief look to see, okay, what are other areas doing? And it seemed like the majority of them, at least for, say, like my side of the code, a single family is still a single family. you don't have to.
Whether
spread
they're a
it.
week at a, it's this family for this week and it's still a
Right.
single family.
But then they also had, criteria of if that's not even, you don't get to have large groups,
Right.
this is, a 3-bedroom house is 6 people maximum or
Right.
what have you.
Yeah, because I will say as somebody, that I use VRBO or Picasa or whatever, when we rent houses, they're just houses.
Mhm.
And they're, but I'm also not coming with 25 of my college buddies and
Right.
having to.
Which like Airbnb cracked down on the parties, like they no longer allow gatherings and parties because it got out of hand in San Francisco and LA, and so they shut all that down. And
Right, you just go rent the house and then
then you throw a 200-person party.
200-person party.
Right, and like what he had to do it, you have these beautiful homes in Hood River and great, now there's a block.
It's a block party.
Well, yeah, a block that would typically have 2-4 people at a house, now there's 20 at each one, that's not reasonable either.
Well, and I would say it's our zoning, it's predicated on that. It's single family, stable family, and 4 people, 6 people in a house, not 20.
And some
And it's
people
like, so things as far as like road access and fire and all those things, it's not built for that. That's not what it's built for.
And some people have called and asked questions. They may snowbird, in the winter, they may go to
Sure.
Arizona.
And I want to
what
rent
have
out my
you.
house.
Yeah, and for that 3 or 4 months, I'd like to
Seems
rent my house
reasonable.
out. That's a lot of these people, what they've said. I'm not here all the time. I'd like to make a little money while I'm not there.
Right. I don't want to be a lawbreaker.
Oh,
Right.
They still rent them, they just don't
Exactly.
give us any money for it.
Okay.
So I guess, we can continue moving on this. Rebecca did some really good work looking at what Lynn and we worked up with in regards to that ordinance. I think we need to sit down again and start working through Rebecca's comments. And I'm sure Dave put Prosecutor Cannell put some comments on there as well. And see where we can get. My thing is, it would be great to get something on the books. We need to find out if we're going to have to go into the zoning code. As long as we don't have to go into the zoning code, this should be an easy one. It's fairly easy, not easy, because we're still going to have a public hearing, and you're going to hear people coming out of the woodwork. But still, if we can know where they're at, charge a little bit, and then we can start monitoring the situation. What it comes down to is there's supply and demand, and the demand for lodging on the west end of the county in the summer months is ridiculous. All of the Hood River hotels are booked. If you look like for this weekend, probably on Airbnb, every single one of them is booked. And so the demand is still there, and people are still having a hard place to stay. When I was serving on the recreation subcommittee for the Gifford Pinchot, and they were doing their analysis on the number of people that they expect to be coming to the National Forest, it is just a graph like this. And instead of creating more campgrounds, they're actually shutting campgrounds down. And the Forest Service's statement is, we expect the private sector outside of the forest will pick up the demand, whether they build campgrounds or RV parks or whatever. And more people are showing up in their RVs. There's less camping. And like you look at the numbers, and the gorge is in essence considered a de facto national park. And we're just gotta live with it.
Yeah,
But
moving forward, we might get public hearings where, like I said, as long as, one corridor, if that corridor's people show up opposed and we set super restrictions there, that isn't county-wide restrictions, because there's different regions here, so.
But you have to remember though, supply and demand, if Hood River shut it down pretty much, the Gorge Commission just shut it down. If the city of White Salmon is now shutting it down, that demand, somebody will meet the demand. And it's only going to push it out further.
Sounds perfect.
For Centerville or High Prairie or
That road, or
but
We can use some economic development, some tourism over here.
Sure.
District 3, that's what everybody's saying.
Most of it's concentrated around Lyle and Trout Lake, isn't it?
For
By
the
de facto now.
short-term rentals,
Yeah.
the majority is in White Salmon.
Well, I'm talking outside the city.
Outside.
Oh, outside the city?
Yeah.
There's a lot in
I don't
line.
spend much time thinking about the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Uh,
proximity to the mountain, to the water.
As I said, if you want to phase it in regions or whatever, that's fine. I just don't want a one-stop approach. to the
So-
county.
So let me add, so either Rebecca or how much can we adjust? I mean, I know, isn't there some, where we have to have equal treatment as far as across, but obviously we have different zoning across the county where we allow certain things in certain areas and not in others. So we should have some ability to tailor
Make a regional approach.
a regional approach. I'm assuming we can do that.
I'm gonna assume that, I don't think that we've had the time to thoroughly
Right.
research the issue, but I think that's a pretty safe assumption that, like any land use, it doesn't have to be.
Right. You can't have every use across the whole
Right, the same
county.
regulation throughout the county, correct. Because
You
there's
can't
gonna
build
be-
an industrial.
You know,
aluminum smelter in my
findings
backyard.
as to Why one area would be treated different than others based on, population.
Right.
Capacity.
Housing density,
existing,
housing costs.
Right.
Infrastructure, things like that.
Land
but,
use.
it would be established.
Yeah, as long as we're keeping that open, I'm good.
Okay.
The other big one that we're gonna come across is when we did the ADU ordinance, it says you're not allowed short-term rental, it only has to be long-term rentals. I've had a lot of people contact me saying, I want a short-term, like, the price of my house is so ridiculously high. In order to survive and live here, being a local, I'm going to short-term rental my house out. and
Whether you
rake
like it
the
or
rent.
not.
Just so that I can afford to live here. And it's gonna be a side job for my wife and the kids. I'm flipping the house every day, but, don't tell anybody my name, but this is what I have to do in order to continue living here on my salary. And so we're gonna have to come to that bridge as well.
But same deal, that's gonna have to be, that needs to be fixed, but if you have a number that you set via region or city or district or mile or whatever, everybody's gonna be screaming, everybody's gonna put in an ADU and start renting it out, but you're gonna have a cap. So when you get to that number cap in that region, you put an ADU in and rent it out, you're still illegal.
Well, and I think Mochi, Rebecca, and I will have to have some conversations on this too, because amending the ADU to allow short term would definitely have a possible significant environmental impact.
Right. You'd have to
That could
redo that
potentially
whole,
really
because the
increase
SEPA, all of that was based on long-term.
Why would, if we have an ADU on my property that my in-laws live in, what would be the difference if they're living in it every day, or if they died and I rented it on the weekend? Why is that any
But you're
environmental?
providing a financial incentive to build an ADU when you can get money on short term.
For people that don't already have one in place, you might be
Yeah,
creating
so
a. got it.
You are
normally we don't have
creating
to
an
worry about
incentive.
triggering
Makes sense.
these
No, that
reviews
makes
if
sense.
we're not playing around with density.
Yeah,
and
that
things
makes
like
sense.
that.
Because again, that we didn't contemplate that every single parcel that people would.
Because, yeah, people.
Because there
might
was
want
not,
to
and
build,
that's been borne out. We don't have very many of them, and we're 5 years.
But theoretically,
years
could my in-laws are in an ADU. If they pass away in 10 years and me and my wife want to move down to 1,900 square foot house and rent my house, that's legal, right?
Right now, the way that's set up, if you have an ADU on your property, you cannot use the principal residence or the ADU. as
For
a
short term.
Oh, interesting.
You can rent it. out
Rent
on a
it,
monthly
but
basis.
not a short term.
Minimum 60, like 2 months. If you want to rent out for 2 months.
In
you don't-
2-month
you
blocks.
don't have issue.
Interesting. All right, learn something new.
But the other side of the coin that other areas have dealt with as well is housing, period. You don't want to also remove housing,
I was gonna say,
people
you
who
would,
can't buy a house but need to rent a house because they work and live here. That's also at a shortage.
yeah, I was gonna
So,
say, we're dealing with need of housing over here, so.
right, I mean, there's the shortage.
Plus, and I will say that was, you know, the ADU ordinance, I mean, it was carefully crafted where it
Oh, that
was,
makes sense.
it was not, and again, that's, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that's how it was done when it was initially put in. If we want to contemplate opening that up, then, but that's a whole process that we would have to, because we did not, it was for permanent, long-term housing for either the principal owners in one or the other to downsize, to create. One of the things we were looking for was more housing stock for permanent residents, not as short-term rental.
Over here, I don't.
So we didn't
think-
look at the economic model of generating income from it. Again, I'm not necessarily, I'm saying we would have to look at that.
I don't think anybody over here would build an ADU to rent, but over there, I can see everybody with 20 acres building an ADU to rent it. That's good money.
You're out of the scenic area, you can't. I live in the scenic, I can't do anything,
I'm
so.
just outside.
Yeah, you're just outside.
Purposely.
Perfect, that's a good place to
Smart.
be. No, I will, yeah, I'm not gonna get on my
But the
soapbox.
thing is, you know, there are a lot of creative people who put a lot of money into providing the services that people are asking for in the gorge that live in Klickitat County that are renting more than one ADU, or not ADU, but something, whether it's a yurt or a
Right.
tent or a, you know, chicken coop or whatever. And
You're only renting those to
we're gonna
chickens.
have to deal with that.
Right,
situation.
well, that's what I said, I'm fully able to look at this situation, but let's look at situation number one first, figure out if we're gonna put a population control on it, and then see if there's a need to address number two. If there is, then great.
Right.
game.
Which I like,
But I think
I,
number two needs to be, the number of number two needs to be factored into number one.
but I do really appreciate that you are, you know, having these discussions and working with the departments and Rebecca and council, because again, as we have found, we may have great ideas and then it's like, we can't, there's an issue. You can't do that because of this, or you're gonna have to, so that we don't waste our time on a solution that we can't actually enact. Or we can enact it, but we have to back up 8 steps and do this, and then this, and then this. Otherwise, we're breaking the law. So I appreciate that, because I think we can be a lot more efficient, because we are gonna have to deal with this. You are correct. Whether we deal with it or not, it is
It's gonna happen.
it's happening now. And that's the whole idea of land use planning, is that you try to get ahead of it, plan for whatever it is, so that you don't have chaos and impacts. And the more it's, it is inevitable, we are seeing more neighbor to neighbor conflicts because of that. It's not like the old days where
Everybody was civil to each other.
well, there's that, but it's also as you get more people and people are using, if you have more transitory people, it's just exponentially, there's the potential for more conflict, because now it's not my neighbor living next door that I grew up with that's been there. And if there's they know, oh yeah, he's working nights, I probably shouldn't be out doing this. That would be disrespectful. It's the short-term rental. They don't know, they don't care. And so then I'm calling Tim and saying, hey, they're being wild over
That
this.
is rental period, whether it's short term or long.
Sure.
Well,
Sure.
that was the one I was gonna bring up. I had somebody call me and they're like, we had this horrible neighbor that was renting this place that was messy and trashy and all
Right.
this. And they got rid of him and they're STRing it, and it's so much better now
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that guy's gone.
Sure.
So, it can go both
So
ways.
actually thinking
Yeah.
about 60 houses right here locally that'd be perfect for short term.
And somehow I would like it, that we can verify that it's actually been a permitted structure. So we know that it's a safe structure, has
A
the proper
permitted chicken coop?
sanitation. I mean, what's the liabilities if it's somebody that just
Easy
threw
enough.
up a building and it's not safe? I mean.
Right.
And it doesn't have a septic, they're just gotta,
Oh, that's what that ditch is
pipe on
for.
it, yeah, because then we're back to the not approved sanitation.
Then we have a whole bunch of.
People pay extra for just being an outhouse.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Really? Are they really?
I don't
I'm sorry, I mean, there's a big demand for yurts that don't have bathrooms in them.
Can we move on?
Yes, yeah, let's move on.
Before we get too far down the septic hole?
Yeah. Yeah.
Septic.
So
Okay.
I understand it though, there is consensus on going towards some sort of recognition or regulation of ongoing short-term use, but taking it outside the pure commercial permitting system.
Yes.
But at the
I
same
would say
time,
that's
that's
what I
one of the concerns that there's gotta be, housing that's not about to collapse. That's not just, imminent danger to potential short-term rental folks, which can be owners for the property owners, but I mean, that's not to the same degree as, improving roads and so forth. It would be on the same standard as the existing use. I would think that we can try to figure out a way to work all that together. But there's got to be some sort of minimal compliance. Otherwise, you have buildings in Miami collapsing and bridges collapsing.
Right.
I mean, I know people like to complain about all these things, but there's substantially less people die nowadays because of house fires, because of some of these regulations about insulation and fire detectors and all this stuff. I mean, stairs are safer, houses are safer.
Oh, yeah, you don't have stairs that are,
There's substantial difference, and it can be onerous and a pain, and a real pain to comply with, but, I don't think anyone in this room is interested in trying to unnecessarily limit property rights or over-regulate, but we have an existing issue that we need to incorporate and make somehow legal and safe.
Right.
That right now, with the lack of compliance, there's no ability to fulfill any interest in safety. So as I hear it, there's a consensus on the board to work towards that goal. Is that a fair statement?
He's a great salesman.
Yes, there is consensus. The conversation we had before that, I don't know if you were involved with, was the things like the glamping tents. It's kind of a hot topic right now. But how do we deal
Well,
with
that's
it?
a full commercial enterprise. That's something else.
Right. But what if somebody's just putting one of them outside their house? Because there's Hip Camp and there's a few of these other.
I want to put a yurt down by my cattle pond in the back 40 acres.
Well,
Now it's
that's
got to
the
be
big-
permitted, and she's going to tell me to build a concrete base for it. And
Well, there's
I'm
existing,
not the engineer, Will.
there's existing structures and utilization through short term, and then there's regulations that increase density. And that's where Mochi comes in, that's where the planning department comes in, because, I'm not gonna give a firm opinion right now, we need to look into it further, but there's likely gonna be a trigger of the need for environmental review at that point. That doesn't mean you can't do it, it just means that it's gonna be a longer, more expensive process to get that result that you're looking for.
So what you're saying is that when it's just a house and all that, and you're just switching out one family for another, what's already permitted and possible, that's easy. When you move to that next step where you put 2 or 3 yurts or whatever on the property, it's moving into the
You're
conditional use.
clearly having a greater environmental.
It's
impact.
moving into the conditional
And
use.
it's a
permit
greater
process.
environmental impact due to a change in the land use regulations, and that in itself can trigger additional reviews.
So what's the current, back to the earlier thing, it's not like public safety. I mean, we have minimum standard. If I want to rent my house and it's a fire trap and I'm assuming I can be, am I allowed to just rent a shack that the roof leaks and
I don't have control over that unless.
no, not that I'm gonna need to get a permit, but the
Right.
potential, the renter would have some recourse,
that
whether it's
goes-
short-term or
That
long-term.
goes back.
That
to
we have
land.
minimum public health, public safety standards that I
People call
can.
us and say, hey, my landlord won't fix this, my landlord
Right.
won't fix that. I don't have any control over that. So we just have to let them know that that's more landlord tenant law and that they would need to seek appropriate.
we hire a
assistance.
fire marshal, which I'd be fine.
Until it reaches a degree that they're out of compliance with current building codes that would regulate that structure.
Yeah, like if
Okay.
it's something,
Right.
yeah,
I'm just saying we must have some, because we have minimum standards now, things that they should
right.
be.
But I can't just go into a home and.
No, and I'm not suggesting
And
that,
even
but
with
it's-
code enforcement, I couldn't just go into somebody's
Right.
home and say, oh my gosh, you don't have a handrail, you don't have a guardrail. I don't have that authority,
Okay.
I mean,
So the last one that I can say is that I've heard from a lot of people on the west side that do have long-term rentals that say because of this, the state rules on, we have people who've been living in places for 16 months who haven't paid a bill.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm never doing this again. I'm just gonna short-term rental. At least I know I'll get paid. And the tenant protection laws, that are changing, we're digging our own graves when it comes to some of these things that are getting passed at the state level.
I wouldn't say we are, but yeah.
We as a
society.
whole society.
Yeah, no, there's gonna be a rental debacle here coming real soon that I don't think the renters understand.
Okay, RVs, something simple.
I don't know about that.
Anybody want to kick that off? The committee? Clerk?
So when we had our meeting, we were gonna, touch on all this. We agreed early that the code enforcement was number one and that Rebecca only has so much time to
Right.
devote to this. We're all getting, and then the question is what's the next? And so we kind of talked about what we thought was next most important. I guess it comes down to the two of you. What do you think? Is it short-term rentals or is it the RV ordinance? What is the next most important that we should deal with? I mean, we're doing triage here.
Right.
Should have been done. 10
I
years ago.
agree. As far as absolutely, code enforcement is the most critical thing that we need to get taken care of. And then for me, I think we're doing this in the correct order. I would do short-term rentals as I see the most, and maybe it's my West End centric view of the world that's more of it.
Could be the lemon donut you just ate.
Could
Too much
be.
sugar. No, I agree. RVs as well.
And
RVs
Rebecca
is
did give us a copy of Benton County's RV verbiage. I have not had a time to print it out and read it, so it may not hurt.
I would think
Yeah.
RVs is gonna be the easiest of the three as well, so you're shaking your head over there at me.
Can I?
Rebecca, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the biggest question that you guys are going to need to address is when we allow people to use RVs for temporary home, whether you are allowing it because what constitutes hardship. So Benton County's is very limited. If you're a caretaker to someone that's ill, if I think it has temporary workers and 2 other circumstances, it's very limited. You only get 1 year permit and then you can renew it, but you actually have to show proof of the hardship, your medical condition or whatnot. The discussion on Monday was whether we are interested in opening up hardship to be the lack of affordable housing. And that's going to be a much broader take as to hardship than other counties are doing, and certainly going to open the door for a lot more people looking for permits if the criteria is simply, I can't afford to live in the gorge.
I say there's one of those that I don't want to kick people out of the trailers they're staying in currently. But if you put some regulation in there, like she's saying, with the financial hardship, you're gonna start having people, we're gonna be a destination.
Exactly.
Not your side, my side.
We already are. Fly over the county. You can see them everywhere.
As I said, so it's something I would like to get a handle on what's there without encouraging more.
And we do have hardship provisions in our zoning code before. It's pretty similar to Benton County. We basically replaced it with the
ADU.
provision because it ended up, because before we didn't consider RV as a dwelling, so RV was not a part of that, but we allow for temporary placement of manufactured home as a hardship dwelling. The deal is they have to remove it when the hardship is no longer there.
And they
But it
did.
becomes a code compliance issue.
Right.
Because you invest so much in putting a septic, drilling a well, bringing the structures, through the driveway. At the end of the day, they might still claim it as a hardship dwelling, but the hardship is not the original one anymore.
Right.
And therefore, as a part of the ADU, we took it out.
Right. The
Well,
dad
that's one
who you
problem
had
here
the
is-
hardship over passed away, but now you have the mom who is capable but couldn't afford to live
Couldn't
anymore.
afford to live anywhere else, right?
And they're on their 4th trailer and all of the other 3 are still there.
And I can't permit an RV as a dwelling because that doesn't have a HUD insignia.
Right.
So I mean, there's.
Well,
all those
I
little
would
things, you know.
suggest just in given bandwidth issues, let's take things that we can work, let's have some success with something. And then-
Hear me say, let's kick this can down the road, right?
I am quoting.
So the other one is, the tiny house revolution.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the tiny house revolution, does that fit under the RVs? Does that fit under the ADU? Where do we see this? Because let's just be honest, anybody in their 20s can't afford to live on the west end of this county. And we have a lot of people living in tiny houses that are really nice, insulated, they built them themselves, some of
Kind of
them,
like a trailer, but
it's prettier or more eclectic, or, you know.
So
I'm
I don't
assuming
see
those
a-
are all in
I don't see a
permit.
whole lot of difference between a tiny
They
house
are
and a
permitted,
trailer.
or-
We have a few people who have permitted small houses, like Houston has a couple, where they've actually permitted them as a structure. They've just
How about the
built them
ones that they're
small.
like
No
basically a
tires?
flatbed
That's
that they
considered
built
an
up?
RV,
You know, if it's
and it
got
would have to
tires and,
be approved through Labor and Industries.
Which it gets approved through Labor and Industries. We
If
just,
they go to Labor and Industries.
right, but you can get the sticker on it, you know, because you can go buy them that already have the sticker. But the question is, how do we then treat it to get it so they can use it on their property?
Right, because most of the time they don't have HUD stickers. They have the RV sticker from Labor and Industries,
Yes,
but not
But
the
not the
HUD
HUD
sticker.
sticker.
I think you're still gonna have to figure out the septic, you're gonna have to figure out the water, you're gonna have to figure out a foundation for it to get it off the tires. Because it was still on the tires as far as I'm concerned.
And that's what Labor and Industries has determined. Because it's manufactured off-site, so then it's a manufactured structure through their factory program, which is then building code.
Right.
But
So
it
really
also-
it's, they don't differentiate between it and if I go buy an RV at the RV.
Right.
Whether I built it myself and got a RV sticker. So then we're back to the, can people live in an RV?
Unless they went through L&I process to get the HUD sticker, then it would be different, but again, that's not me then, that's L&I.
Right.
And then we do a placement permit if it had the HUD sticker. But we're not allowed to do a permanent placement permit for just an RV sticker.
So the next one is if we bring on code compliance and we have these people living in a tiny house and they're either staying at a friend's property or they have their own land or something. And they're working here in the gorge at one of these jobs, that all these people, every one of them has a, help wanted, or they're working for one of the, seasonal water sport industries or something. Our code compliance officer comes on board, the neighbor says they have a tiny house over there, go shut them down. Are we going to go out there and have our code compliance and go tell them you can't live here? Go somewhere else. We don't have any availability in our trailer parks because that's where you would usually put them, is in a trailer park.
Yeah, there's nothing.
But the trailer park down there at Bingen or, at the bridge is full all summer long. There's no availability. It's $1,300 a month if you do want to stay there for a month.
Wasn't the issue just allocating limited resources, i.e. that code compliance officers not?
Right. So we can differentiate. I mean, that goes back to the why we
Yeah,
would set
that's
here's the
number one
priorities and
list
we
of
only
10.
have, I said, if you wanted full compliance with all code on every single thing, it would take 10 people. And I've said that and said that there's not a house, there's not a parcel in this county that you couldn't find something out of compliance.
And that's kind of my thing, is that I have no problem having that person tell whoever's on the phone complaining about something that the commissioners have taken this off the nuisance list while they work on a remedy. If we're working on a remedy, I don't want a code compliance person out there having.
I'd say no.
Just wanted to get that understood because I know the previous board said we will not kick people out of the place they're living in unless it's under the nuisance and abatement and the property's getting sold.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
So I just want to have that clear,
There might be
crystal
one
expectation.
exception. to kicking people out of the property they're living on. They might be in an ADU, might be on Harms Road. Sorry, my in-laws.
Oh.
I knew exactly where you were
Yeah.
going. But you just, so you know, you said that publicly.
That's fine. They know I love them, kinda.
We never want to say never.
Never
So that's,
Okay.
is that good for, I mean, Rebecca, that gives us some direction and we can start working on these things. And
On the first couple.
yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you again
Figure
for all
out-
Rebecca's ability to research, and
Yes.
she's doing a
The
great
time
job.
that the prosecutor is allowing Rebecca to give to us is very important, and I appreciate it very much. And Mr. Jake, I would say figure out a way to make a tiny house, not an RV. If it has tires on it, I call them the same. If it doesn't have tires on it, I'm a thumbs up.
That's your fourth topic.
Yeah, put it up on blocks or something.
Well, I mean, usually you want, like, whenever you park your tiny house, you know, just like an RV, you know, you
Jack it
jack
up.
it up
It's
so
not
that
on the
it's like,
wheels.
Well, that's fine. If their tiny house ain't moving, it tires off.
you want the tires off.
Unless it's a trailer.
I mean, all I know is if I had a tiny house and I lived on the west side of the county, I would definitely want my tires on in case there's a fire and I can just hook up
Right,
and
hook up and
go.
go. Yeah.
I'm the only one who gets to keep my house.
Yeah.
I gotta be able to
Skedaddle.
differentiate a tiny house from an RV. So some way in that, whether it's a HUD sticker, something, otherwise.
Can't really
to
get
me,
a
they're the same.
I think that's all yeah, that was-
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a conversation
Better run.
to have with Wayward Industries.
homeowners insurance.
No homeowners
Yeah.
insurance.
Is it a vehicle insurance you could get with?
It's be like an RV.
My point, well, if it's an RV, it's an RV, that's my point. Make it different than an RV if you want to treat it different than an RV.
Alright. Well, I think there's a way through everything. It's just writing words on paper and getting him to agree to it.
That could be the hard part. He hasn't so far agreed to our words on paper.
That's probably because he's smarter than us.
That's true.
Other, yeah, other.
No comment.
Anything else? One thing I did want to bring up before I forget was, we started the discussion on Tuesday about citizen comment and adjusting the time. And I would propose that we do, because we're getting more people that want to comment, and it's 7 minutes is really generous across the.
And they tend to repeat themselves a lot with 7 minutes. 'Cause
Well, and you
they
wanna-
use the whole 7 minutes, so.
To use it all. And so what I would suggest, maybe we go, we go to 5 minutes and we see how that works as far as, are we still having a backlog of people that, because not everybody uses all of their, now at 7 minutes, there's some people that only talk to, 3 is a more universal,
We
that's,
usually roll around 4 people in
Right.
30 minutes is what
Right.
we get through.
I would
And if we
say,
have any back and forth,
Right.
we have 44 people on the Zoom, and we get through 4 people at 7 minutes. And it's the same people
right.
usually.
I think we do 3 minutes, and if there's extra time, we'll let them speak again.
What about looking into prioritizing we're having some folks have the same comments every single week, like once a month, or at least deferring people that commented in the previous month to the end of the line in case time is short, looking into maybe mechanisms like that.
I would still say cut the 7 minutes.
Yeah, it's hard though then that requires discretion access to the board. I don't know. That from a practical standpoint, yeah, that totally makes sense that you shouldn't be able to just hog up all the time.
But if
And
we
maybe
enact
it's
that,
at the
then
point
we're-
of, it's at the board recognize in the how they recognize meaning you're free to speak to the board. And maybe we do
call
it that
a
way,
blast, yeah.
where it's like, oh, I see, I have 5 people that want to speak. One of them has spoken all the time. And so maybe you have to go last because you've already had access and we have limited, because I'm not interested in like I like the period, and we have always had that period, and you have to have, so people have a chance. But we also have an agenda that we have to get through. We have the business to get through.
We have a lot of stuff to do.
We got a lot of stuff to
Long.
do, right, and it makes it, so, and I think, but, so I think we do need to limit, yes, sir.
My belief is it should be 3 minutes. And 3 minutes allows, if we want to respond to them, then we have some time built in there, 2 minutes are back, for the
Right.
response if we choose to. But it's 7 minutes, and then they're requesting us to respond after
Right.
7 minutes. Now we're at 10 minutes a person or longer.
We
You only
can't
get
talk to
3 people.
anybody, right?
So 3 minutes, and honestly, we live in the world of TikTok. You now get 1 minute. If you can't get your point across in 1 minute,
It's true.
it's too late.
I mean, three is plenty adequate enough time. It is actually overkill as far as. I'm
And
concerned,
if
but
you
it's a
want
good-
more than that,
it's a-
send us a letter. We respond to the emails. We talk about that. Speaking of, I don't know, but I mean, we're getting more and more people send us emails to all three of us individually rather than BoCC. And then, I mean, I don't know if I respond to each one of them and you respond to each one of them. I mean, are we really just overdoing it? And then you might say something that might be a little different than what I say. And so now they're sitting there more confused because Dan said this, Jake said this.
Yeah, if we're gonna.
Or they're
respond-
not confused. That was the whole point of
They
the,
know, I'm not making assumptions.
I was gonna say, if we're going to be responding to each and every email like I try to do, that could be an issue.
So,
normally what I don't usually, if it's to me directly, if it's to the Board of Commissioners and I say I have that, if there's a response, I don't touch it because I feel like there should only
You
be
guys
one.
don't.
We don't see, I
I was
don't
gonna say, you
see,
shouldn't
we
see
can't
it by-
see
right,
all the
Should
other
never
stuff.
be reply all.
Right, we never do reply all because we shouldn't see any of that.
And most of the
it's not-
time, I don't even reply signally. I take that person's email, put it over here, start a whole new one. So there isn't a possibility of
Okay.
of a change. But yeah, you'll.
But what'll
never know.
happen is then they will, and those are the ones I don't respond
Right,
to.
but-
So what they'll do is like, oh, I talked, Commissioner Christopher said
Right.
blah, 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 blah,
And that's
blah.
happened.
And then it's like, I can't respond to that
They-
because now you are now
You might-
communicating.
Facilitating a violation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Essentially, they've emailed the whole board. I've taken their email, put it over here and sent one separately to them that's not attached to that one.
Right.
And then they CC one of these two
Yep.
guys in the response to me.
Yep, they've done that.
But
That's-
it's extremely, frustrating, the Open Meetings Act, especially for the Board of Commissioners, is, the idea is to ensure transparency, but in practice, it can be very difficult to converse with constituents, because you want to be responsive to constituents, you don't want to just blow on
Right.
constituents, obviously, that's why we're paid by tax dollars, where we serve our
Right.
constituents. But at the same time, most constituents have very little accurate understanding of the limitations imposed on you because of the Open Meetings Act. And so unless they get that response, they get that, and then they don't understand why you can't respond to them via your colleague's comment, because at that point, it's a discussion.
Because it's a discussion. Now that I know what they said,
so when they do that, isn't the appropriate thing to do is Lee takes that and puts it on the board agenda for the next month or for the next meeting so that all of that is then disclosed publicly in our packet. And that is the only way to save, because it happens. And I was talking with the Skamania County Commissioners, and they said, if somebody BCC or CCs us all, I mean, we all saw it. So then they get it printed out and it goes into the packet,
Every email that somebody just concludes us all in, even if nobody responds to that email, you're
In
talking.
order to have a discussion or follow
about it. No, we can all see it. We just can't respond because we can only have that discussion.
You can respond individually.
Individually. But I
So
can't,
you're saying if like my case where I took that person, I took them over on the side and then after that, they BCC'd everybody in it
or CC'd.
or CC'd everybody in it and you got to see what I typed when that's
Right.
not the way I.
but I can't, right, we can't, then we
Then
can't
you
have
guys
that
stay out of
discussion
it and we'll put that
until
on the
we bring it
agenda.
up at
Right.
then it's in the public domain. So, yeah, no, I've
Because, yes,
seen
every
we've all
time-
seen each other's
Yeah.
comments before
somebody
just
will do that
don't-
and include
yeah.
Jake, and then I'm just done.
I'm done.
talking on that. The minute I see something from him, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm done. So, because I
And I'm sure
can't.
you've seen that from me too, so.
I use it, it's always on Facebook. So how does that work when you see it on Facebook, you know?
Don't post on
I
the
don't.
thread. You might
I'm
not see
sure
me
your
on
wife
Facebook
reads
anytime
funny
soon.
faces.
It
you
does,
know,
actually, yeah. I have a filter though. Yeah. So, okay, so sounds like so I hear for both of you 3 minutes.
I would prefer 3 minutes.
3 minutes and with the understanding, okay,
The
And
board
you
may
can
respond
choose-
at our.
may respond at our discretion to
And
allow more
you
time.
will think
And if there's time left over, people, we can go back through and they can comment again.
I would say
If
if
there's
you,
still
if you
time.
go back through, you could, I don't know, I was gonna say if you go back through, I'd limit it to 2, but on the recomment.
I will say though, that if somebody is not using decorum and respect, I will not respond to any comments.
No.
I made that, it's a hard rule in my family and in my house that unless you speak with respect, you will not get spoken back to. I don't believe in negative reinforcement.
I agree.
Well, that's what I said it's like, it is at the citizen comment is just that.
I think
It is
we
your-
explained
it
that pretty
is-
clear on Tuesday, myself included. I don't think they were
I know I
listening.
kept my mouth shut though.
Oh, so you're.
I was reading the handful of patients part here over and over and over.
I was reading.
I need to make my own.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's not, you can say, and it is unfortunate because there is a long history, long before my time, that it was informal, there was discussion,
Well, I
that
don't
only
think
recently.
Those people
went
would
away.
show up standing in front of us and act the way they act when they can hide behind a screen. I don't think they would stand there and say the things that they say via Zoom. So because we have a Zoom, people are gonna act different. I call it keyboard cowboy.
But there are some things that come through the BoCC that I do respond to on your behalf.
Yeah.
And I try to make sure you see my response and what that was.
Oh yeah, we love that. We just
Yeah.
don't respond to you, so we don't have a problem.
And at that time, sometimes you guys do respond back to that person anyway. I don't think you really need, you don't have to,
Right.
you don't want to. But I always try to make sure you see what's coming out of your office.
Appreciate it.
Okay, anything, what else do we have?
We do have, I wanted to bring to your attention the fair. They have a special occasion license that you'll need to sign. I did not send it to each one of you right now because you can discuss it right now. It looks like it's their beer garden possibly.
Oh, yeah.
You
Oh,
don't
for
have. to-
Oh, yeah, so for them to get
Right,
there.
you don't have to respond because if there is no response, they
It's
automatically.
automatically, yes, but it also takes more time if we don't respond. Are they up against their limit?
No, I don't think so. We're still a month
I mean,
away.
I'm happy to, if the board's okay, if we're okay with me signing, so
Yeah, I'll take it down.
Yeah,
and
no
have the
beer
sheriff
garden
sign
at
it.
fair this year.
no beer garden.
Moratorium on beer gardens at fair,
Moratoriums are all the rage these days.
I guess.
That's why, and just while we've got all the experts in the room, because that was my discussion yesterday, was about the correct use of terminology. You know, we have suspended code compliance. We don't have a moratorium on. And I want to make sure that's, because that's a legal term to me. A moratorium is where if we stopped doing something, that's not a moratorium. I mean, it is, anyway.
Well, to me, I don't care whether you call it a moratorium or a suspension or whatever the heck you call it. As far as I'm under the understanding is we have no law we can enforce right now.
Well, that's not a moratorium, though.
That's what I'm saying. So it's regardless of what wordage is used.
I mean, from a practical standpoint, the effect is the same,
Yeah.
where you're not doing
We
something.
don't have a title. We don't
But
have
be
a code.
careful
I would
using
say a
throwing terms.
moratorium, you are not allowed to exercise the rights that would have regularly.
Nor regularly
I
been.
say, I haven't ever used moratorium on code compliance. To me, that's you don't want something.
So
I don't think I.
Do we have anything else for these two? Cause like they got work.
they got work to do. No, I think we're good.
We got office decorating.
Get out of here.
Thank you. I have better things to do.
Give you an update too on your town hall meeting.
Yeah.
Oh,
I have, you also have something to sign there. I talked with the Glenwood School.
You're okay with us
They're,
using the
they're,
gym?
they're fine. And it was nice because she
17th, that was
suggested,
the first.
don't
It's a
make it too
Tuesday.
early because people need to have time to get
Yeah.
home to be able to come.
Right. No, I like that.
6:30 to 8:30. And she's gonna make sure they have a PA system for us to use. They have a brand new system. And also Wi-Fi will be available.
Is that good enough in timing for us? Prosecutor Canal?
2 hours.
No, that's
like the
August
date.
17th, the date.
Oh, yeah, we talked yesterday.
Okay, that's
Okay.
what I was, because I know there's
It's
time
2
sensitive,
hours
because we
versus 2
it
hours.
was the first date we were all here that met the noticing requirements.
I talked with,
Yeah, I agree. 2 hours is a heck of a long time for this discussion. I think we should go in, have a discussion, make it, the longer.
Do we have to
it is-
set a time as far as, can we
Well, I
just say it
figured
starts
they
at
wanted to
6:30?
know.
Oh, we could be in the building at 6:30.
If they say
No,
6:30 to 8:30, I think you're gonna have people doing multiple comments. It's gonna get sidetracked. It's gonna get in the weeds. It's gonna get messy.
I think the last one after about an hour 15.
Right, that became non-productive.
Productivity curve.
Yeah.
Diminishes, actually.
Then yeah, maybe.
And I
say
will
an hour and
take
15.
responsibility for that.
Say an hour and 15. If we want to stick around after that, then discretion.
Well, even getting people out the door, shall we say, 6:30 to 8.
Right.
And then
for what
Share.
for what we say our meeting is and what we put on here, we want to put more on here than what we think our meeting is.
I was gonna use. It's not that, the only thing is, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding when we publish this, that it's like an open house where you could show up. It's like, oh, I can't get there till 8:20. Just
and we always
starts
say
at
just the
6:30.
start time.
Right,
We never
okay.
give a time limit.
No, and we will. One thing too, we should reach out to the sheriff, invite the sheriff as well, because he's one of the parties.
And
And you are good with this date as far as that works in your schedule?
And then assuming we are gonna make this to discuss track D and not shoreline management or solar panels or whatever.
It's specific to the, what did I say?
Yeah, we were trying to find
Yeah,
specific general.
So if somebody brings up
Specific
something
general.
outside, something outside that scope.
We're not,
yeah,
no,
right.
this is not a town hall to
Yeah.
talk about other issues. And remind me then to reinforce that to myself. Because I have a tendency to, no, I'm looking at everybody because it's like, well, while we're here, is there anything else you want to talk about?
you're really good.
I
at
mean,
that.
I know, and I remind me, I will write it on the bottom of here. That isn't, this is specific to the issues in Glenwood. That we want to get some feedback from folks.
Well, while we're waiting, I got an email from Steve Gilmore.
Well, how did your thing go
That's
yesterday?
what I'm saying. It says, hi, Art and Greg. This was forwarded from Wendy, who did the thing up there. Steve was out of the area or something. I don't remember what he said. He said, you two in the Klickitat commissioner were just awesome and dazzled Linda Steiner as expected. Thank you for spending so much time with us and giving her tons of things to think about. It went really well. I mean, it was bad. It was so
Good, cool.
Essentially, it sounds like they do about 900,000 tons. Their landfill is full by 2040. So they're either going to have to do, trash to rail essentially, or put their own incinerator, you might say, and then even still call it out ash.
That's Kathy.
So it sounds like they might be still looking at a pilot project of possibly shipping off 100,000 ton to see how it works. And they were, this chick is the second in command up there. She got a staff of 400 in county.
Whoa.
Staff of 400. And she's going to be more than likely number one in command. real shortly, so. Yeah, hopefully, I mean,
Okay, good. Good job there.
I don't do what I do.
Use your guiding skills for good.
There you go. There you go. No, we didn't talk about clean energy and how we're gonna be supplying all the power to King County. I shall take your trash too.
Yes, bring it to us. So,
For when we get close.
when we get close. Yeah, not today, I guess. That's the general.
We're going now, boys.
Yeah, general. Specific general language. Okay. Anything else?
I used to work town hall,
Tape
but
too.
Okay, I've got nothing else.
no, and then I had childcare yesterday, but I don't want to discuss it.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I will second.
Okay, I have a motion, a second to adjourn the meeting till next Tuesday. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We are adjourned. Thanks, folks, on the Zoom meeting.